Welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me for this video and supporting what I'm doing out here. It's time for my weekly update on how things are going out in the woods of the inland Northwest and starting my off-the-grid and back-to-nature life. So sit back, enjoy a cup of coffee with me, and see what's been happening this last week other than the cold and snowy weather. Now, in last week's video, I showed you my solar setup, and if you'd like to check that out, a link to my off-grid playlist and that episode are in the description. And if you want more than just these weekly video updates, I do blog about what I'm doing and post at least 2 to 3 times a week on other platforms, all of which are also listed and linked in the description below. And I encourage you to check them out and take part in censorship fighting and decentralized social media platforms.
You can't give me the right to be a human being. I'm fine with that right. Now you can keep me from having that if you've got all the policemen and all the jobs on your side.
Now what you're currently seeing on the screen is a room I'm building off the back of my RV. I'll get into that in just a little bit, but before I do, I want to show you an update to my solar setup. As I mentioned last week, I wanted to move my panels to a spot where they would get more direct sunlight and they would sit more upright and help keep the snow from collecting on them. I put a couple of pallets together and then used some material I had laying around to get the cables up off of the ground so myself and my kids don't get tangled up in them. As I mentioned last week, I did lose a little bit of efficiency by extending them out an extra 15 feet or so, but I also get more direct sunlight. Basically, before I moved them, I was able to get a little over 5 amps per panel in direct sunlight, and now I'm down to just under 5. The upside is the panels are now in more direct sunlight, so I get the maximum charge and power for a longer period of time. Now, when I do get to my permanent location later this year, I'll shorten up the distance from the charge controller and the batteries to the panels, which should bring back up their efficiency. I also ordered 2 more panels, which should be here later this week, so I'll update you on that in next week's video. Now back to the structure you're seeing me work on. Even though winter is coming to a close, we still have a good month of it here, and even then, we'll still have cool temperatures for a few months yet. I need more room for my kids and a more efficient way and an off-the-grid option to heat my living space. I'm currently using propane, which keeps me connected to the grid of energy, so to speak, in order to stay warm. I came out here to do just the opposite of that, to remove myself from the centralized grid of control and find new ways to do things. It reminds me of a term my friend Jeffrey coined. Instead of going into the new normal we're all being steered into, we're trying to preserve old regular. That's what you saw in the beginning of this video, was me making coffee in the old regular way, rather than using electricity to grind up my coffee beans. Now, this first installment of my additional living quarters is simply to house a wood-burning stove so I can vent the heat it produces into my camper instead of using propane. I'll also have room to hang freshly washed clothes above it to dry, rather than producing the energy required to use a modern-day dryer. I'll have the roof done and hopefully the walls finished by the end of this week. What I'm most proud of with this is so far I've only purchased 4 2x6s from a corporation. The rest of my building materials have come from individuals who have their own independent sources of wood and gathering pallets. All the sheeting I'm going to use to close the structure in will have come from pallets. I do this in an effort to keep costs down, but also to show an example of alternate ways of doing things rather than just feeding the corporate machine I'm trying to exit. As I finish this section, I'll continue to add on and wrap it around the side to the door of the camper, making it one big accessible living space for me, my kids, and our guests. The cold and snow slowed me down last week, but I'm back at it and moving forward. Next week, I'll show you around the property I'm staying at and introduce you to the animals out here, as well as my regular updates. Until then, remember to be your own master instead of giving control of your freedom over to someone else. Thanks for joining me for this video. If you like my content, share it. It's the best way to support the efforts of this channel and only takes a couple of clicks. Most importantly, stop using big tech platforms and decentralize. Share this from a decentralized and blockchain-based platform to help spread the word about them.